Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. That's ziprecruiter.com/zip. ziprecruiter.com/zip.
Hello and welcome to 1,000 Natural Shocks. I'm your host, Gabe S. Dunn, and I am so excited because we have Margaret Killjoy on, who is one of the hosts of Cool Zone Media podcast, which is a podcast company collective that you should absolutely be listening to. Margaret hosts Cool People Who Did Cool Stuff and also the Cool Zone Media Book Club. I have, no joke, listened to 8 hours of her show in a row. I had it on all day, and I'll do it again, and I'll do it again. She's fantastic. We get into anarchy and organizing, a bunch of other stuff, but it's mostly just a really wonderful and healing and educational conversation for me as a baby anarchist. So please enjoy.
You told a lot of lies about achievement. They caught you when they got you to believe it. Thumb and finger held to their foreheads in an L shape, trapped in a capitalist hellscape. Let's fight back and have some talks about class and the massive cost of the disasters brought to fascists and Nazis, fat cats and fox. It's 1,000 Natural Shocks, a Bad with Money podcast.
Welcome back to 1,000 Natural Shocks, a Bad with Money podcast. I'm your host, Gabe Dunn, and I am thrilled and excited, and a big fan of her show, Cool People Who Did Cool Things. Margaret Killjoy, do you want to tell my audience who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my show, Cool People Who Did Cool Stuff, which no one gets the name of right, including many of my closest friends.
People.
Yeah, absolutely. And we even, before we released the podcast, spent a long time workshopping between things and stuff, and we were like, this doesn't matter. I'm Margaret Killjoy. I'm a podcaster. I have a show called Cool People Who Did Cool Stuff and another show called Cool Zone Media Book Club. And I come from a background of activism and anarchism, and I do also write fiction. I'm a trans woman living in Appalachia, which is an interesting time to do that. And I'm not sure what else. A lot of stuff. I have a dog. I like my dog.
So I've listened to so much of your show, but I just listened to you reading your essay, which is How to Live Like the World is Ending or Dying,
Oh, yeah.
How to Live Like the World is Dying. And I listened to you read it, but I'd also read it. Can you tell my audience a bit about that and what that is, and then what revisiting that was like?
In probably the end of 2019, I wrote this essay called How to Live Like the World is Ending. And then later my friend was like, actually it'd be a better play on words if you called it Live Like the World is Dying. So when I started a podcast, it was called that. But the essay is called How to Live Like the World is Ending. And it was me trying to reckon with feeling very apocalyptic, but also looking at things like every generation thinks that the world is going to end with them. And the world does end in small ways and big ways constantly, and people often survive that. And so I was just looking at, how do you manage that, or how do I manage that? And the way that I ended up is that I ended up picking 4 different priorities that are all kind of at odds with each other, and refusing to put all of my eggs into a single basket. And let's see if I can do those 4 off the top of my head. One of them is that, all right, the world's going to end and we're going to go with it, right? And so you live your best life. Every breath is our last breath, YOLO, whatever you use to get through that kind of thing. I'm not telling people to take up smoking, but maybe really think about what if I died tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one of them. And then one of them is, what if the world is ending? What if we can kind of stop it, right? Mm-hmm. What if we can do something about it? And so what does that look like? What does it look like to try and stop the end of the world? What does it look like to fundamentally, what does it take to have a revolution, whether it's a violent revolution, which has a bad track record, or a peaceful revolution that has a bad track record, or, one of those revolutions have bad track records. What if we pulled one of those off, right? And one of them is, what if the world's going to end and we survive, right? And, the kind of apocalyptic doomsday scenario, prepper, how do you hang out with hopefully more than 5 people, hopefully a couple hundred people at least, and try to survive? And how do you set up your community for preparedness, right? And then one of them is, what if you accept that all the times that people thought the world was going to end, it usually doesn't? And what if everything is going to continue and you should probably keep paying your rent? Or maybe not, I don't know. But maybe don't take all your money out of retirement. I actually don't know how that works. But I've been listening to your old podcast a bunch recently. What does it look like to assume that the world might linger, right? And how do you not completely give up the idea of the current continuing into the future? And so by thinking about those 4 things and keeping them roughly in balance, I feel like I'm kind of setting myself up to be kind of all right no matter which one of them happens. I mean, many of them aren't all right, right? I mean, all of them are kind of in some ways not all right, because even if the world lumbers on, it is not the best world. It could be a lot better. And capitalism is a sturdy beast, and that's a problem. But it does prove to be sturdy. So I wrote that back in the end of 2019, and no one I knew was on that page. I was like, this is happening. And everyone's like, okay, whatever. And fortunately for nobody, about 3 months later, COVID hit, and a lot more people realized that they needed to be prepared. And that the supply chains and things that we count on are much more fragile than people realized. And so preparedness became a little bit more of a daily conversation. And at least in the kind of radical spaces that I'm in, it became much more normalized over the next several years. And people started realizing that the mutual aid organizations that we were already setting up are part of this larger preparedness and resilience framework. And so revisiting it, I mean, it was interesting because I was like, well, it's 5 years later and I'm still here. So that's progress, right? But also, we're just 5 years further into the apocalypse. We are 5 years further into outright fascism in the most powerful military the entire world has ever seen in history. We are 5 years further into climate change. We have continued to see genocide play out in front of us. And, things continue to be bad, right? But the other thing is that things continue to be beautiful also. I'm really grateful for the last 5 years and the however many years I've been alive before that.
This is what I've come to as well. I feel like now, even now, 5 years later, to a lot of people in my life, I sound insane. Which is, I've really been grappling with that a lot lately. And it's really been frustrating and devastating. Even people close to me who I consider progressive or leaning socialist act like I am fully a conspiracy nutcase. Yeah. And I'm sure me buzzing my head hasn't helped. But it's the level to which I try to tell them what's going on and they just won't hear it.
Yeah.
Has made me reevaluate a lot of friendships and relationships, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think that it's interesting to me to be listening to your show and you talk about anarchy. And people think of anarchy as destructive, but it's also, I think you wrote a better world is possible.
A while ago, I wrote this essay called Anarchism and Its Misunderstanders. And anarchism as a political ideology has a bad rap that is about 1/4 earned, right? I would actually say we probably have less blood on our hands than any other major political ideology of the left or right of the 20th and 19th century. But, who knows? Maybe that's because we've had shorter moments of creating societies based on our principles. But we have this problem where the word anarchy means one thing in a dictionary and the word anarchism means a completely different thing in the dictionary, right? And so anarchists promote what we would call anarchy, but we don't promote the definition of just chaos, right? And instead we believe that out of chaotic and organic situations, people can actually be their best. And there are methods by which we can organize and actually get things done in non-hierarchical ways, right? Anyway, so that's just my, like, for anyone who's listening, being like, what is this Margaret person talking about? Anarchism has this long history of being, it actually predates Marxism and other forms of not all other forms of socialism, but it predates a lot of other forms of socialism. It basically was this idea of like, well, we want socialism, but we want it from the bottom up. It's almost an even more intense version of democratic socialism. And it is contrasted with what we would call authoritarian socialism, which is like the USSR and things like that. But we basically believe we can all get along. We can all take care of each other, not in a magic utopian way where if we got rid of the rulers, everyone would be just totally chill. But rather, there are methods by which we can organize ourselves to create more just and equal societies that give us more autonomy as people.
For my listeners who don't know any of this, what are some of those ways? And how does that differ from socialism?
I mean, it's interesting is if you look at the birth of the American labor movement, sorry, I run a history podcast. If you look at the birth of the American labor movement, there are a ton of people who would call themselves socialists or anarchists interchangeably. The Haymarket Martyrs, who are the reason that we celebrate May Day all around the world, except the United States where we have Labor Day instead, were Chicago anarchists who were killed for their political beliefs. And in a frame-up trial, you can read all about it. And it's a dramatic story. There's bombs involved, but none of the people who are on trial threw the bombs, et cetera. And it was a labor movement. And the people who were killed by the state during that literally use the word socialism and anarchism interchangeably. So it is a socialist thing. However, by the time of the 20th century, you get these very specific definitions where if you mean communism, you mean essentially Marxist-Leninism. If you say socialism, you're probably talking about democratic socialism because you're contrasting it to communism, with a big C. And then if you're talking about anarchism, you're talking about this other thing, right? But anarchism, in general, believes in building societies from the bottom up, where often at the sort of community level, you're getting together and making decisions and then federating with other communities in order to then make larger decisions. And there's all kinds of different ways of perceiving this. Anarchist communists will say one thing, anarcho-syndicalists will say something slightly different. And, there's different branches or ideological ideas within it. But overall, we basically argue for the thing that almost every socialist movement prior to the USSR was arguing for, which was, well, literally all power to the Soviets, for example. The Soviets were local organizing decision-making bodies. And so when you're saying all power to the communes, all power to the assemblies, all power to the local level, and then coming together to let those local decision-making bodies work on a larger scale. And the way we contrast with democratic socialism is that democratic socialism will be trying to usually use the democratic forms of the state in order to sort of take state power, right? And use the existing frameworks. And anarchists, by and large, don't argue for using the existing state, but instead doing these things sort of directly. And there's all of these, there's other groups that have worked in very similar ways, but come from different backgrounds. The Zapatistas in Chiapas are a bottom-up society that has never called itself anarchist, but instead kind of comes from indigenous ideas and Marxism and reaches something that we love and they love us. It's totally fine. And then you have something like democratic confederalism. Sorry, everyone, I'll stop spewing out the ideological names.
No. This is what the show is.
Oh, okay, cool.
This is all I care about.
And so then you have something like democratic confederalism, which is practiced in northeastern Syria and is what a lot of people are fighting for in different parts of the world right now, which is a very similar thing where you're taking sort of these indigenous ideas, in this case, the Kurdish ideas of how to have a society. You're adding to them, in this case, a Marxist feminism. And then the Marxist feminists were like, actually, you know what? We just read a lot of Murray Bookchin, this old anarchist guy, and we like it more than we like Marxism. So now we're switching over to be an anarchist-influenced, Marxist, feminist, indigenous thing. And they created democratic confederalism, which is democratic confederacies. It's people coming together to federate in a democratic way. It's different than anarchism. And personally, I don't care. Any of these things where we have a society based on taking care of each other instead of murdering each other, and instead of capitalism where we're encouraged to try and crawl to the top of the heap at everyone else's expenses. And yet at the same time, as long as we do it in a way that maintains our freedom, our ability to be ourselves, our ability to not be ruled by some authoritarian dictator, then whichever one of those works, I'm on board. I just have been calling myself an anarchist my whole life, and my whole adult life, and it works for me.
I'm using that now as well.
Hey, want to try my new Echo stethoscope?
Wow. I have never heard heart and lungs sound so clearly.
And the digital display gives you clear visual results, too.
Hey, that's a 3-lead ECG right there.
I know. Finally, a modern stethoscope, right?
Amazing.
Echo Health combines the stethoscope you already know with enhanced audio and advanced AI to help you detect heart and lung conditions earlier and with more confidence.
Hey, I need my Echo stethoscope back, please.
No way. Can't go back to the dark ages now.
Order yours today and get up to $50 off, plus a free customizable chest piece cover at echohealth.com/podcast. Your purchase may be HSA and FSA eligible and may qualify for CME reimbursement. Plus, Echo guarantees you'll detect heart and lung conditions more confidently. If you don't, return it for a full refund. Go to echohealth.com/podcast for up to $50 off plus a free chest piece cover. That's echohealth.com/podcast.
Something that you talked about a bit too, which is the different types of apocalypses and the different people that have survived and not survived.
Mm-hmm.
And I recently got into it with, I'll say, my dad. And he was like very involved in Vietnam War protests and stuff like that. And we were arguing because he was like saying what you're saying, where it's like, well, it's been bad before. And I'm like, no, this is uniquely bad. And he's like, no, it's been bad before. And we all came out of it. You know, people got arrested, but we came out of it fine. And I was like, you came out of it fine.
Yeah, the people of Vietnam didn't come out of it so great.
You you came out of it fine. And even like you're a white, straight man. So what happened to your like black compatriots? What happened to like you? Like he was like, oh, and then Vietnam ended and we were successful and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you were.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, in terms of like apocalypse and the ways in which people come out of these small apocalypses, I really appreciated you talking about how that's not true for everyone.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a bit more? The ways in which we tend to think that historically we came out on top, but it's like, who's we?
Yeah, I mean, we have like a survivorship bias, right? We can't be descended from the people who died if they died before they could have children, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people who die in war are dying before they can have kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have this massive survivorship bias, and we also have a social level survivorship bias. Like I think about with the end of the Cold War, I actually had a somewhat similar conversation with my father, where at one point he was like, that every generation thinks the world's going to end with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, that's true. And about 5 years later, my dad was like, do you know all the fish in the ocean are going to be dead in like 20 years? And I was like, yeah. And so he came around to being like uniquely bad this time around, right? Because we have multiple converging crises, right? Instead of somewhat localized crises that have effects all over the world. That said, they could have had a nuclear apocalypse. Like, we look back at the Cold War and we're like, of course no one pressed the button. But the only reason we think that is because we can't be from a timeline in which they pressed the button. Like, if all life on Earth had been eradicated in nuclear holocaust, then we wouldn't be here. So we can't be from that timeline. And that's my most esoteric quantum physics take on anything, right? So we have this like, well, the world didn't end. And that's just, seems like kind of luck. If you look back at the Cold War, you're like, oh, we almost all died a bunch of times, right?
Yeah.
But there is also this thing on some level where people were like, nah, I don't want to destroy all life on Earth. Like a few people probably do. And fortunately, those people weren't the ones in front of the buttons at that given time.
Well, they don't want to destroy all life on Earth, but I think they're not even thinking like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're thinking like fear, crabs in the bucket. Like, is someone I was just speaking to, we were talking about how the U.S. is determined to be the most, have the most power energy-wise in the world. And I said, why? He's like a climate guy. And he was like, I don't know. Like, it does not matter if China surpasses us.
Yeah.
But we're scared.
Yeah.
If someone else has the nukes, we need the nukes.
Totally.
Also, I think what you're saying is kind of a lead up to a very slow and banal singular apocalypse, maybe, where it's just kind of a boring, that passed, but now that led to something else. And now we're just, the apocalypse isn't like an asteroid hit us. It's like, yeah, a lot of bad stuff's been going on. It's sort of a snowball turning into an avalanche. Yeah. It's not that interesting.
I think it'll be interesting. Unfortunately, I think that the natural disasters are going to get increasingly common. I think we're going to see the weakness of our infrastructure. I was talking to a friend who lived in Asheville during Hurricane Helene last year. And I was talking about it yesterday, I think. And he was talking about being like, all of this stuff, this whole civilization we got, a few too many inches of rain, we had nothing here for a while. We think we have built this incredibly resilient society. And in some ways we have, and in other ways we haven't. I also don't think we're going to hit an instant breaking point. I don't think there's going to be the switch goes off and all hell breaks loose, right? Mm-hmm. I think that we're going to see, the crumbles, as they call it on my network, Cool Zone Media, where infrastructure is just going to start falling apart. Although I think in the US, part of the reason we're going to see it is that I'm not convinced that this is my most conspiracy brain thing. I'm not convinced that the people who are in charge right now, I mean, I think they're fascists, or that's the easiest word with which to describe what they're doing. And I do read history for a living, and I think that's a reasonably accurate way to describe them. But I think that they're like the copper thieves in the wire, like stripping the wire. I think that they're just like stripping our infrastructure for money right now.
They're desperate.
And I don't think that they're desperate. I think that they're counting on desperate people and whipping up right-wing talking points, because right-wing people are really easy to convince to be your like unpaid thugs, And I could be wrong. I just look at the government and I'm like, it's businessmen stripping the country for parts. And because I can't look at what they're doing to the economy and be like, that's how you build a strong nation. Because paleoconservatism was a good way to build, or even neoconservatism or whatever, not this fascist thing, was a reasonably good way to be the richest, most powerful country by destroying everyone else.
Right.
They were good at that.
Yeah. And now we're on our own turf destroying that.
Yeah. And all of the other most powerful countries are teaming up because they hate us. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I'd hate us too.
I don't think that's a conspiracy. I think that's probably real. I was saying desperation in terms of like, they're so scared of being the ones without the bunker during the time when we're all, we're all desperate.
Totally.
Although I literally do not know what it's going to take for there to be some sort of mass uprising, which seems too good to be true. In the sense that when people on social media see what I'm posting or like see, because I'm posting things from city council, from anti-ICE demonstrations, from all these actions we're doing. And they'll be like, oh, you're so inspirational. And I'm like, what did I inspire you to do? Or, oh, I hope somebody, oh gosh, why isn't anyone doing anything? We are.
Yeah. Join us or do it yourself.
I think, I don't know, I'm like, everything's connected and social media and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, what is the breaking point for you people?
I think about this a lot though, because I think there's a couple things at play. One of them is what I call like the fuck it point, right? And the fuck it point is the point at which, again, I read a lot of history. I'm discussing history here. There's people who are like, the Nazis took over the country I live in. I'm going to seduce and murder officers in the woods, right?
Yes.
There's people who did that, right? And there literally are people doing this to ICE agents right now. Like, I don't know if that specific thing, but we keep seeing in the news that someone hits their fuck it point and puts their foot on the gas and runs over an ICE agent, right? And the thing is, that doesn't go well for the individual who does that.
Right.
And what's complicated is that most of the time when you play it out, if you imagine your little chess game or whatever, it also doesn't necessarily play out well for the movement, right?
I know.
But it does when enough people do that. And it also does, I think the main thing that changes the value of spicier action, and I actually think individual actions are so-so, they're not necessarily as useful. The things that, like the LA uprising of people throwing bricks at ICE cars, I'm not telling anyone to do anything they don't want to do.
Mhm.
Don't break laws, it's bad, whatever, I don't care. But like, the reason I want to say that I like that is because the thing that changes things, I think, is when the more militant and the spicier rebels are supported by the people who wouldn't take those actions themselves. And I think we're seeing that more with ICE. I think that people who are a bit more liberal, who have kind of looked down on the kinds of tactics that I've advocated for a very long time, I think that's people are starting to be like, well, we've been saying this is fascism. I sometimes find that some of the people who I would have pegged as more liberal are taking that more seriously. Because I think some of the more radical folks are coming into this jaded where they're like, both sides are equally bad. And you're like, look, both sides can be bad, right? I am not a fan of the Democratic Party, right? And I'm not a fan of capitalism, not a fan of neoliberal politics. I'm not a fan of a lot of stuff. There is still just a fundamental difference between that and fascism, you know? And so I'm seeing people who I would have called liberals, less likely to be like the people who go out door to door and try and get people to vote for Democrats, but the people who are like just kind of trying to get by, liberals, are starting to be like, well, I'm not mad at those people who, you know, threw bricks at the windshields or whatever, right?
Luigi.
Yeah, Luigi is a perfect example of that. And actually, maybe the more useful example, even though I just said individual actions, whatever, because a lot of people on the center and the right also looked at Luigi and were like, yeah, I get it. You know?
Yeah, I think a lot about the comparison to history and how people within that time frame don't think about history, so they would be upset. You know, the idea that I got into this with someone else where they were like, well, not all cops are bad. And I was like, well, the Gestapo had people putting paperwork together too.
Yeah.
They're so reluctant to do that. And yet they watch a film like Inglourious Bastards and they love it.
Yeah, totally.
So why can't they make the connection?
I mean, it's hard, right? Because in some ways, a film like Inglourious Bastards is dangerous, right? Because we shouldn't really, I like Inglourious Bastards, I'll watch it anytime. But on some level, you're like, everyone that we're opposed to is a human. And dehumanizing them, it's not even a moral question. I think it's also a strategic question. Although I actually think it's a moral question too. We have to understand that the people we're opposing are people, not because we shouldn't stop them. And so we have this thing where it becomes really easy to imagine violence of a dehumanized group of people, including the Nazis. It's one of the easiest. Well, it used to be historically the easiest way to signal it's okay to kill these people in the movie is you make them a Nazi, right?
Exactly. Then it became sort of Middle Eastern general, terrorist general.
Yeah. They like to toss that one around. Who can you just kill?
When one of the Iron Mans, because I've talked about, I did like sometimes I watch movies and talk about them on this show. Oh, cool. And when one of the Iron Mans, they're not even like married to what kind of Middle East it is. There's like a conglomerate. One of them is like the bad guys are like a conglomerate of people from different Middle Eastern countries all working together. I think in a way, in order to be like, this isn't offensive, but it just becomes like it's incomprehensible.
And it's a thing that we got to be careful about, you know? And I also think that one of the purposes of art can be like, it's okay to just be like, I'm so mad at this thing that I'm willing to just kill these people. And actually, in some ways, Inglourious Bastards does a little bit. No, I don't know. I was about to say there's like moments where you're literally humanizing the Nazis in which they're like smart, capable actors as compared to like a war movie. Like a war movie where you're just like, they might as well be androids, you know? But I don't know. Yeah, like people will love Inglourious Bastards and then not look at what's happening in a certain way. And
well, do you think there's a way to, maybe the way is to try to reach these people? Like one of my friends is like, I want city council to set up a fund for cops who don't want to be cops anymore, or it's not going to happen. But when I first saw him, the first time I ever saw him, we were at a protest and he was trying to talk to the cops and National Guard about how the suicide rates for people in their jobs and how, save yourself and you don't need to do this. It creates so much trauma for you that it will last your whole life, blah, blah, blah. You can't tell if anyone was affected by that. But I remember I was like, oh, I got to talk to that guy. That's a really good strategy.
I've been saying for a little while, the thing that I want on my tombstone is the single thing I've accomplished in my years and years of activism is I think I got a cop to quit once.
How?
I was at a nerd convention and I was going to go sleep in my van and I was a guest at the convention and I went down to go sleep in my van and the street that I was going to sleep in my van in was like crawling with cops. And I was like, I can't sleep here. I got to go back upstairs. And so I go into the kind of organizer's hotel room and I'm like, hey, can I just like sleep on the floor of your closet or something? I can't sleep in my van. There's cops everywhere. And this woman stands up and she's like, I'm a cop. And I was like, are you serious? And she's like, yeah, over in such and such city, different city. I'm a police officer. I was like, why? And we talked. I do not recommend this. I cannot say that this is what you should do. I had adrenaline the entire time. And I just was like, why do you do that? And, and she talked about it for a while. And she's like, well, I mean, a lot of it was just I need a job and I'm trying to keep people safe. I was like, well, but your job is to put people into cages if they do things that are against the law. And they're like, yeah, but I don't bust people for weed. And I'm like, but you are participating in a system that does. If people have this, I often think about weed busts as like one of the most clear examples of like, if you just abstracted, if people had no context and you were like, there's a society where if you're caught with a certain plant that makes you kind of bored and like, anxious,
sleepy,
that you'll spend 20 years in a cage, right? You are describing a dystopian society, and anyone who is an enforcer of that society would be a Star Wars Empire mook who you can shoot with a blaster, morally, if you told this as a fictional story. But that's not what it looks like here on the ground. And honestly, by talking about it like that, and then I was at another convention a couple months later in a different city, and she was like, hey, I quit. And
hell yeah.
I don't know whether it was job dissatisfaction, but the other thing is that a lot of cops, this is what I've heard. This is anecdotal. A lot of cops quit after about a year because a lot of people go into policing because they think that it might be part of making the world a better place. And then instead, the police are a gang and they are, a violent, dangerous gang that is cruel to its own members. And people leave. And I do think we should make it easy for people to leave. I do think part of it, the thing that you're saying, we always need to have a system by which if we're mad at people for what they're doing, we have to be able to say, you stop doing the thing. We're glad you stopped doing the thing. And can't hound people to the rest of their lives, because if you do, you make a permanent enemy. And that is, again, both a strategic and moral failure.
I agree. I mean, I'm new to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, but not thinking about systems. You're not new to so much useful
I'm
stuff,
new to just outwardly being like, I'm an anarchist.
Yeah.
Although I think I thought that when I was much younger and I got talked out of it.
Yeah.
Which kind of I think sometimes happens.
Lowe's knows you've got a job to do, and we help get it done. With the MyLowe's Pro Rewards program, eligible members save more with volume discounts on qualifying orders through a quote of $2,000 or more. Join for free today. Lowe's, we help, you save. Offer can't be combined with any other discount, contract, and/or special pricing. Exclusions, more terms, and restrictions apply. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
You also wrote something called Revolutions Are Built on Failure, which I also liked. And I was listening to, I don't know I forget who you were talking to, but it was like something about how like sometimes the activism fighting like is the win.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about that a little bit? I found that really fascinating.
Yeah. This is kind of a thing that I had to come to because I've been losing to campaigns for about 20 years, sometimes winning campaigns, right? But we're not in the post-revolutionary society that I thought I would be in or dead by now when I was 20 years old, A lot of what I've learned about this, I'm actually cribbing from nihilist anarchists, who I'm not actually one of. I actually believe really strongly in hope. And that's like kind of a contention between me and nihilists. But there's this idea that I do think is incredibly useful, which is to say that the action itself is the reward. It is the winning. It is the, we are living life on our terms when we are brave and when we do what we believe is right. And so you can therefore say, I'm proud of my life, no matter how long it is. I had a good life because I stood up, and maybe I didn't stand up for a really long time, and then I did, right? And maybe, I did bad stuff for years, but then I tried to do something right. Or I did nothing, and then I did something right, Or even I tried to do something right and made everything worse. That's one of the big fears, right, that we all have. And, because you don't know what's going to make the world better, right? And a lot of milquetoast actions don't seem to be high risk, so they don't seem to make the world worse. Whereas a lot of spicier actions might be bad idea, but they might not be. And it's hard to know. And I think that, I don't know, it's just by choosing to act, I think we can find our victories. And I also think that even on a larger strategic level, I think that this is true because I think we can conceive of ourselves as part of this endless motion towards freedom, towards taking care of each other, right? And the thing that we get to do, there's no static win state. I do have like I start off with like anarchism is the following society where we make decisions in the following way. But one of the main things that anarchists, I would argue, we hold that holds us different than some other ideologies is that it's more about a process. It's more about methods of deciding things and coming to do things together than it is like, this is what society should look like. You can't make a blueprint of anarchy unless you're trying to say, you don't have to do this. I'm just giving you an example. Because all I can say is, I want to collectively dream a better world with other people and then try to bring that into being. So my ideology is baked into the process of trying to make the world better. Mm-hmm. And that helps me because then I'm able to say, well, my goal is to be part of this process. And I am part of this process. And the other thing that's really hit me about activism in general, it's so easy to be like, oh, we keep losing and all this stuff. Once you realize that things can always get worse, there's no bottom. There's no, like no matter how bad you could imagine something happening, worse things can happen,
Sure. And we're preventing that.
Exactly. We are holding up the world like from a bottomless chasm. And there's also no top. And we could always be trying to make the world better, Mm-hmm. And so we get to do that. And it's really easy right now for me to be like, and that rules, because I'm like not in prison, like I'm not like,
I know.
I'm like worried, right? But I'm not like currently suffering. And I'm like, every now and then I am currently suffering as a result of these decisions. And then during those moments, that'll be the harder time to test my resolve. But what else can we do with these moments other than build our resolve, right?
Yeah. I think trans people have a unique history of helping each other out and sort of everyone's like, we're going to have an underground railroad for hormones.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, probably.
It's happening.
It's happening, yeah. Or you can get them from overseas. Not that I condone that.
Yeah. They would, Crime is your own decision.
Sure.
Yeah.
One thing that is tripping me up is even in LA, and I have to be okay with this. Even in LA, there's different groups who have different agendas doing different things. And for a minute, it was like, in my head, I was like, we all got to band together and there should be a march of all of us, which has happened a couple times. But there are just going to be different groups. And even like I was in Portland for a little bit and I was like, I'm going to see if what ICE out of Portland is doing. Mm-hmm. And maybe ICE out of Portland should join with ICE out of LA. But then it's kind of like, well, each group is doing its own thing.
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't matter if we become one mass, if people are just fighting for their city in their way. And I would get frustrated sometimes with other people's methods. Mm-hmm. And wanting to put forward, a method that I agree with. And that is also just me. My couple of my friends are like, you can't control how other people protest.
Yeah. It's
So,
messy.
Yeah, it's messy.
And I think what it really behooves us is to imagine strategies that see our ideological and political and strategic and tactical diversity as a strength. Because if we develop a strategy that is like assuming everyone will do what we say, we're not playing to our strengths. The left should be a diverse place, right? And I think the answer to how is stuff like, you ever heard of the St. Paul principles?
No.
During, one of these like RNCs or something, Republican National Convention protests, I think in Minneapolis, St. Paul, maybe it was a DNC, I don't know, during some big protest about 15 years ago, people were coming out of the ultra-globalization movement, where the ultra-globalization movement was built on all of these different groups. It was a movement of movements, all of these different people with really different ideological positions, tactical positions. You have, pacifists and violencists. No one calls themselves a violencist except me when I was 19.
Yeah.
But which is funny because I'm not one now. But whatever. Anyway, you have all of these different groups of people with very different ideas of how to get things done. And yet, despite a lot of internal tension, they did get a lot of stuff done. This is one of those moments where you can look at the ultra-globalization movement and be like, I think we actually prevented things from getting a lot worse. We didn't create the beautiful utopia that we dreamed of, but I think we actually halted a lot of really bad things in terms of the developed nations stripping the developing nations, right? And the way we did that, part of it was by endless meetings. Part of it was like sitting around and having these spokes council meetings where someone from the black bloc is like, but we want to wear all black and break things. And someone is like, no, it messes up our thing because we're all locking ourselves to things and dressing like butterflies. And, and someone else is like, you're both wrong and whatever. But by hearing each other out and trying to get people into the same place whenever possible, and then also like literally they would tactically, if the goal was to shut down a meeting, right? They would say, all right, you go block this area, or we'll go block this area in our way. You go block that area in your way. Are there ways that we can coordinate to help each other? And so it would be like, people are locked down in this intersection. This happened on April 16th, 2000 in DC. People are locked down in this intersection where they're, nonviolently resisting and trying to block traffic to keep people from, delegates from going to the International Monetary Fund meetings, right? And the police are just beating the hell out of people, and everyone's locked up, and everyone's like locked to things and can't protect themselves. And so then the black bloc rushed in wearing all black down to fight the police, pushed the police out, and then kept going. So the police now have this other target that's much more high priority to them, and leave those other people alone, right? And the black bloc gets what they want, which is to be a little bit more confrontational and to not plan to get arrested. The average time you get arrested in a black bloc is an accident, right? Whereas if you lock yourself to things, you're like, I'll probably get arrested today,
Yeah.
So both groups get what they want when they coordinate or when they take into account each other's tactics when they make decisions. And so again, I get into this thing where I'm like, well, if the people who want to sit in front of ICE buses and the people who want to throw bricks at the ICE buses can get their shit together with each other, and the people who want to like bake sale, I live in the mountains. I actually am not. I don't want to tell the anti-ICE movement what to do besides holding up a big foam hand that says like, fuck yeah, and try to help out all the ways that I can. But I'm not as physically present in this movement, so I don't want to give too much advice. But the St. Paul principles, sorry, I know okay. They finally formalized this in some principles called the St. Paul principles, where they just were like, all right, we don't talk shit on each other to the media. We keep our conflicts, which are real, internal to the movement. This gets complicated by social media, I got to admit. But I actually think people should consider this with social media. They say, and we want to keep separating by either time or place tactics that don't work together, right? Like if people are locked down in an intersection and you start breaking all the windows and then the cops show up and then you leave, that doesn't work with the people who are locked down. You're being a dick.
Right.
And so they just were like, we are going to, compromise with each other. We're going to say, you can do your things your way. We'll do our things our way. And how do we have each other's backs?
Yeah, keeping the infighting to ourselves is a real problem because the right will just be like, oh, that's a rapist, whatever.
Yeah, totally.
And we're like, this guy was creepy one time. So, I mean, it's just, and I saw like maybe it was Hard Times or something article that was like, I sent it to the group, which was like leftist group too disorganized for FBI to infiltrate. And I was like, so true.
Yeah.
That's that's really smart. I'm going to read that and take that into account. And I do think that that's really smart. I want to talk about the what is it called? The horseshoe, where I've been thinking a lot about this in terms of, it started with thinking about AI and then thinking about, I guess it started with guns, where
you go far enough left to get your guns back.
Right, exactly. Where there's the liberal, neoliberal thing of gun control, which I do believe in. And then also now seeing all of this violence up close every day and being like, well, that's what the Second Amendment was for.
It's messy.
Yeah. Can you talk about how that kind of horseshoe goes?
Yeah. The old cliche is if you go far enough left, you get your guns back.
Yeah.
Orwell has a quote about the rifle on the wall of the, peasant is the symbol of democracy and it should always stay there. And Marx has a quote about the working class needs to stay armed. And of course, right wing has, and Orwell and Marx wouldn't have gotten along. But they're both creatures of the left. And, and then of course, the right wing will have its pro-gun thing. And then, but fascists aren't pro-Second Amendment. Actual fascists aren't.
Oh, yeah, because they want to control who has the guns.
Right. And unfortunately, the Second Amendment is really well positioned to help our country become fascist because one of the things that fascism relies on to seize power are volunteer thugs. Are the people who are going to sign up to go fight the leftists in the street and do extra state violence is an important part of fascism.
Not even ones who are paid to do so.
Right.
Just
exactly.
random people who showed up to the 4th of July protest in weird Uncle Sam outfits trying to punch us.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That is a hallmark part of fascism. And I mean, I guess it's also a hallmark part of when society polarizes really hard, right versus left. 1920s Germany was incredibly polarized, and there was communists and anarchists fighting fascists in the street for 10 years, until the fascists seized state power. But firearms are such a messy thing. I actually think we're seeing a really interesting horseshoe thing literally today and yesterday. The Department of Justice, things might have changed by the time this comes out, but the Department of Justice was saying, you know what? We're considering banning all trans people from owning firearms. I
saw that.
Yeah. And I was thinking, well, so much of the supposedly 2A crowd is so cooked in MAGA that they're just going to be good, we hate the transes, take away their guns. And instead, the thing I'm seeing, the NRA of all people was now you can't do that. And I earlier today, I was watching a right-wing YouTuber be I don't understand the transgenders. I think they need help, but you cannot take away people's guns if they haven't done something directly wrong,
Yeah.
And thousands of comments supporting that message, including the we don't understand the transgenders part, right? But that gave me a little bit of hope that a weird part of the horseshoe that kind of might even hold on to a non-fascist, I don't want to say anti-fascist, but a non-fascist part of it, because fascism does want to eventually say okay, well, now we have the monopoly of violence. It's all on the right wing,
Yeah.
But guns themselves are so messy. This is a thing that I talk about publicly. I am armed. I first became armed once I started getting doxxed by Nazis who knew where I lived and were sending me pictures of my family and stuff. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to learn how to conceal carry. And since then, I've become someone who like shoots recreationally, and I do believe in the Second Amendment as much as I believe in government, I guess. And but I also think that people oversimplify this conversation. I think that the anti-gun crowd needs to be listened to more actively by the far left. And specifically, I think you get into this really horrible calculus, whereas individuals, guns do make us less safe. Like the statistics about this are pretty clear, especially people who are gender marginalized in pretty much any direction are much less safe if there's a gun available to them or anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
If you live in a house with your boyfriend and a gun, you're so much less safe, right?
Right.
And that needs to be listened to. But I also keep finding in history, and unfortunately one of the most telling examples of this, I keep forgetting to take notes. I'm a kind of terrible historian. I do these episodes and I remember my takeaways, but I can't tell you exactly where all of them were in history. I remember reading about one genocide. I want to say it was between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, but I can't remember. What they did is they went around and disarmed everyone. That was the first thing they did.
Mm-hmm.
And they threw all their guns into the sea and then they murdered everyone, And I think it was the Haitians who had moved to the Dominican Republic, but I couldn't promise you. And the idea that armed minorities are harder to oppress is true. Mm-hmm. And the state reckons with people capable of doing violence very differently than people who are not capable of doing violence.
But it also puts a target. If the level of power that is unbalanced, if it looks like I don't even have to shove a DHS person. Mm-hmm. I could be near one and hit them with my elbow and I'm arrested.
Yeah, totally.
So if I had a gun, I'm dead.
But yes and no. If you have a gun, I would not bring the people who bring guns to demos. I'm
no.
There are probably specific places for it. I've seen some drag defense where the other side is showing up with ARs and it maybe makes sense for us. I don't know. That's really complicated. That could go really badly very quickly.
Yeah.
But
not my area.
Yeah. But I do think that there's if cops are there's an individual we don't like with a gun, they're going to be we're going to shoot you, right?
Right.
But when cops are there's 10 people we don't like with guns, they're going to be so what are y'all's demands? And then they're not going to give it to us, right? But they're going to
legally a hostage situation.
Yeah, totally. And they're just, power only recognizes power, and it's complicated. And it's because also when we choose to take power, it's also really messy and often bad too, right?
Right.
And and I don't think that people stockpiling small arms is going to fix anything. But I do think that I think trans women have a reputation of owning guns.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
well,
we had to.
Yeah.
It's literally why I got a gun. People said they wanted to murder me, know? And people like murdering trans women an awful lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet on some level, me owning my gun might make me less safe, right? But it might make trans women more safe. But I don't know.
Because then it's just who is the good guy with the gun?
Yeah.
Who decides that?
I know. Yeah. And it's just and the mindset you get in when you are armed is different. Yep. And it's not good. And it is
I see it in their eyes. I see the absolute change in these people who it's wild because I think it makes them even more afraid. Why are you I'm in one of my friends to the protest wears a Lilo and Stitch onesie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
awesome.
Why is a Lilo and Stitch onesie? He has a bullet hole in it. What the fuck?
Because someone shot it?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Why is you are wearing full tactical gear. You have
Yeah.
a gun, and you're scared of what? What exactly?
I mean, but that's because like trans women are notoriously bad at being misandrists. And so I don't want to go into misandry by accident here.
I don't care.
Masculinity is a form of armor,
Yeah.
right? I think about it because I like boy mode for safety reasonably often, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a trans woman in Appalachia and I can pass as a cis man if I have to. I can't pass as a straight cis man, but I can pass as a like, don't fuck with me gay, you know? And when I do that, I am putting on masculinity as armor, and it is a way of staying safe. And when you're putting on armor, it's because you're afraid, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like nothing is more truly fearless than walking down the street in a miniskirt. Like nothing says like, I am not afraid of the world. You can't hurt me, you know? And people get it backwards and they think of masculinity as strength. And like, I'm not anti-masculinity, but so of course, this person who's showing up in a plate carrier and AR-15 to the like scary queers, you know, it's like, you're terrified of us and we don't know why, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
The only way in which gayness is contagious is if you're already kind of gay, you know?
Well, like, also, yeah. I mean, also the thing of, you know, I'm sure you're used to this, but like when I've interacted with ICE or DHS or whatever, or LAPD, who I can't even get into the whole thing with them, but they are so confused that we don't have a hierarchy.
Yeah.
They are constantly asking us, well, who's in charge? Who organized this?
Yeah.
Who was putting this together? And we're like, no one.
Yeah.
And they cannot fathom why we are all here together.
Yeah.
Like that we're not some sort of like group. And
yeah, that you didn't have to be told where to go in order for you to like
that like people got
that
upset. We're all strangers. People got upset and they came down to the detention center.
Yeah.
And they cannot figure out who to talk to because they just don't, and they are baffled.
Yeah.
And so that's something that has been really enlightening to me. And one of my friends in one of the videos is like, have you never heard of community? Like they can't believe that people would like have a belief and then go like do it. And that we're not like paid by George Soros. I don't really know what they think.
Yeah. No, and it's so hard because you know what? That cop probably lives in the suburbs and like and not everyone lives in the suburbs in this way, but like probably lives a pretty isolated nuclear family life and probably doesn't understand community, you know?
Yeah.
And that's sad. Not where it makes me like, my empathy is like lower than my anger in this particular situation, you know?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I could talk to you for a million years. Where can people find you and learn more about you and mostly your work?
You can find me. I think my website exists, birdsbeforethestorm.net. But you can also find me. I have a Substack where most of it is free. If it feels important, it's free. And then every now and then I do more personal stuff, and that's behind a paywall. My day job is that I have a podcast called Cool People Who Did Cool Stuff and a second one called Cool Zone Media Book Club. And you can find those wherever you find podcasts, like this very podcast you're listening to. Just type in Cool People Who Did Cool Stuff, or forget and just type in Cool People and it'll probably work. And I also write fiction as one of my main things. I wrote a trans witch YA book, came out from Feminist Press about a year ago, called The Sapling Cage. My newest book is the third book in the Danielle Kane series. That's a punk rock Scooby-Doo, paranormal investigators driving around in a bookmobile trying to deal with the supernatural. And that third book, which you can read on its own if you want, is called The Immortal Choir Holds Every Voice. I have this thing where I have to name my books as if I'm naming a black metal album. And it really messes with my and anyone else's ability to remember them.
No, but it's great for SEO.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I'm also, I believe, the only Margaret Killjoy in the world.
I mean, that's great. I think, but one of my friends is like I'm torn between, okay, do I need a really generic fake name or so you can't find me?
Yeah.
Or do I need to have like the most, should I have done a different new name other than Gabe,
Oh, I remember when I was a baby anarchist, I met this woman a couple years older than me. And her name was Jane. And about like 6 months into it, I figured out that her name wasn't Jane. And I was like,
Perfect.
you are the smartest person I've ever met. Everyone else is named I was
know.
Magpie. Like, everyone is memorable names. Jane,
No,
literally the word for not memorable woman name.
I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I fucked up. I was writing for this blog for a long time, and then it started occurring to me that everyone else was using a fake name. And I was like, what the fuck? Anyway, it's too late.
Yeah, fuck it.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'm a huge fan, so go follow Margaret's Substack and listen to her podcast.
Thanks. And I've been enjoying your stuff a bunch recently too. So go listen to
Huge for me.
more Gabe stuff.
1,000 Natural Shocks, a Bad with Money podcast, is a production of Noted Bisexual, produced by Melisa D. Monts and Diamond MPrint Productions, edited by Diane Kang, post-production sound by Coco Llorens, and music by Zach Sherwin as sung by Sam Barbera. Thank you, love you, bye.
Everything from clothing to household items are getting more expensive each day. The world of fast fashion has complicated clothing production by shipping cheap parts around the world to whoever can sew them the cheapest. And now you, the consumer, are paying the price with rising costs. American Giant is about keeping things simple and close to home. They aren't affected by tariffs because their products never leave the U.S. Skip the tariff and snag yourself American-made clothing with American Giant. Get 20% off your first order when you use promo code STAPLE20 at American-Giant.com. That's 20% off when you use code STAPLE20 at American-Giant.com.
Valspar Ultra starts at just $29.98 a gallon. So we've got you covered when your daughter wants to paint her room again after last year's masterpiece of a unicorn mural.
Dad, please.
Or when you realize that maybe you went too hard on the grayish.
I miss color.
Or when you were sure you wanted a home gym, but your elliptical is currently hanging your laundry.
What about a home office?
Shop everything you need for your next phase with Valspar. Available at Lowe's. Price varies by Shein.